Section 1. The paradox of helping. Why good intentions can destroy you. That is a truth that few people are willing to hear. You cannot save people who are addicted to their own suffering. Alan Watts once said, "No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now." And that is the problem. Most people are not truly living. They are drowning in illusions, and when you try to help them, you risk being pulled under. You think you're being kind, you think you're doing the right thing, but sometimes, helping people becomes an act of self-betrayal, because not everyone wants to be helped. Some just want to be rescued, and there's a dangerous difference. Helping is empowering, rescuing is enabling. Helping teaches someone how to stand, rescuing convinces them they can't. Watts believed that the greatest spiritual mistake is trying to awaken someone who still loves their dream. You cannot awaken a person who benefits from their sleep. You cannot guide someone who is invested in staying lost. The modern world glorifies self-sacrifice. We're told to pour from empty cups, to heal everyone, to be endlessly compassionate. But real compassion is not weakness, it is wisdom, and wisdom knows when to stop, because some people do not want light, they crave attention. In the dark, they feed on sympathy, they manipulate pity, and they will drain your spirit in the name of need. In psychology, there's a term called emotional parasitism. It describes those who subconsciously attach to others for validation, energy, or identity. They project their pain into you, and if you're not awake, you'll confuse that projection for love. Alan Watts often warned that when we attempt to fix others, we unconsciously assert control over them. We rob them of their spiritual growth by denying them the pain required for transformation. We think we're being good, but what we're really doing is interrupting their karma, because suffering is not always punishment. Sometimes it's initiation. When a soul refuses to learn, life must teach through chaos, and if you interfere, you inherit their lesson. You become the substitute student for someone else's spiritual homework. So Watts would say, do not try to fix everyone, do not save those who refuse to swim. Observe, understand, and if necessary, walk away, because sometimes the most spiritual act of love is distance, and that's why this lesson matters. Not because we should turn cold or cruel, but because your energy is sacred, your peace is not charity, your time is not a bandage for the wounds others refuse to close. In the next section, we'll explore the first two types of people. Alan Watts says you must never try to help, because doing so will cost you your clarity, your boundaries, and eventually, your sense of self. Section 2. The victim and the martyr. The two faces of emotional addiction. Watts once said, you can't be what you pretend to be, and that's exactly what the first two dangerous people do. They pretend to be helpless, but beneath that helplessness lies control. They manipulate emotion to stay comfortable in their misery. These are the victim and the martyr. 1. The victim, the master of emotional gravity. Victim is the person who has built an identity out of pain. They wear their suffering like a crown, and if you're not careful, they'll make you kneel before it. You'll recognize them by the way they talk. Every story ends with someone betraying them. Every opportunity ends with something going wrong. And every piece of advice you give ends with, yeah, but you don't understand. Victims don't seek solutions, they seek sympathy. They don't want healing, they want an audience. Their lives are built on emotional gravity. The heavier their story, the more people they can pull into orbit. You can try to lift them up. You can listen, comfort, encourage, but eventually, you'll feel it, the silent pull that drags your own energy downward, because the victim feeds on attention, not transformation. They thrive when others invest energy into their drama. They are addicted to pain because pain gives them identity. Alan Watts would say, they cling to their ego's tragedy, because letting go means the ego dies. And until they are ready to die to that illusion, no amount of your help will ever change them. When you try to save them, they will unconsciously sabotage your effort. Why? Because if they truly healed, they'd lose the story that makes them special. They'd lose the excuse that shields them from accountability. So, the most compassionate thing you can do is step back. Let them face the silence they've been running from. Because sometimes, the absence of rescuers is the only force powerful enough to wake a victim from their dream. 2. The martyr, the saint of self-sabotage. Second type of person looks like the opposite of the victim, but in truth, they are twins in disguise. But the victim drains through weakness. The martyr drains through sacrifice. The martyr is the one who gives too much, They pride themselves on suffering for others, but secretly, they crave recognition for it. They'll tell you, "I always put everyone before me." But listen closely, there's resentment beneath the virtue. They use self-sacrifice as a weapon, a subtle way to say, "Look how much I endure, and yet no one appreciates me." They don't give to love, they give to feel superior. They suffer to feel significant. Alan Watts would remind us that this is the ego's cleverest disguise. The ego pretending to be holy. The martyr seems selfless, but their selflessness is rooted in control. They ensure everyone remains dependent on them. By constantly helping, they guarantee that others never outgrow their need. And here's the dark truth. When you help a martyr, you're not helping them, you're helping them stay trapped in their addiction to suffering. You become part of their emotional loop, the endless cycle of give, burn out, resent, repeat. Watts taught that real compassion does not mean carrying others' burdens, it means refusing to participate in their illusions. 2. Step back from the martyr is not cruelty, it's clarity. Because true spirituality is not about how much you suffer, but how consciously you live. And when you finally understand that, you stop trying to be anyone's savior, and you stop letting anyone feed on your empathy. In the next section, we'll reveal the third and fourth dangerous types of people, the ones who hide their destruction behind charm and chaos. Alan Watts warned that these people can corrupt even the strongest minds, because they disguise their darkness as depth. Section 3. The manipulator and the chaos seeker, masters of spiritual corruption. Alan Watts once said, "The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless." And this is the essence of the next two dangerous archetypes. People who fear stillness, truth, and authenticity, because those things expose their illusions. They thrive in chaos, because chaos hides their emptiness. These are the manipulator and the chaos seeker. They are not lost, they are strategic. They don't just drain your energy, they rewrite your reality. Point 3. The manipulator, the puppet master of empaths. Manipulator is not always cruel. Sometimes, they're charismatic, wounded, and magnetic. They appear vulnerable, intelligent, even spiritual. But behind their charm lies a dangerous gift. They know how to read human weakness. Alan Watts warned that the ego's deepest addiction is control, and the manipulator has mastered it. They control not by force, but by emotion. They don't demand, they imply, they don't attack, they guilt. They twist your kindness into obligation. You'll notice they always find ways to make you responsible for their emotions. If they're upset, it's because you didn't care enough. If they fail, it's because you distracted them. If they lie, it's because you made them afraid of the truth. They play the role of the misunderstood genius, the broken soul, the spiritual rebel. They speak in philosophies, quote, enlightenment, talk about energy and consciousness, but all of it is a mask for their unhealed need for control. And the most dangerous part, they make you question your own perception. They distort truth subtly, so you start doubting your intuition, your memory, even your reality. This is psychological warfare disguised as emotional intimacy. Watts often spoke about the illusion of separateness, but the manipulator weaponizes this truth. They convince you that we are one means you must tolerate their poison, that they use spiritual language to blur boundaries, to keep you trapped in their orbit of guilt and confusion. When you try to help them, they thank you until you stop. And when you stop, they turn cold. They punish you with withdrawal, silence, or shame. You'll start chasing their approval, thinking love can heal them. But remember this, you cannot heal someone who uses their pain as a weapon. The moment your empathy becomes their leash, you've already lost yourself. Watts would say, when you try to control life, you lose it. When you let go, it flows. And that applies here. The way to defeat a manipulator is not confrontation, it's detachment. Cut the strings, walk away, and let silence reveal their truth. 4. The chaos seeker, the soul addicted to disorder. Where the manipulator uses control, the chaos seeker uses confusion. They are the people who cannot survive peace. Stillness terrifies them because it forces them to face themselves. They mistake drama for aliveness. Alice. Alan Watts described this perfectly when he said, "We cannot be more sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain." And these people are addicted to both. They crave intensity, even if it destroys them. You'll find them constantly in crisis, always in a fight, a breakup, a new disaster, and no matter how many times you help them, the chaos returns like clockwork, because the storm is not around them, it is them. They thrive on adrenaline, emotional spikes, and sympathetic saviors. They'll call you at 2 a.m. crying. They'll say they need advice, but what they really need is an audience. Every time you save them, they reset the cycle. They don't want solutions, they want stimulation, because in their world, calm feels like death. Psychologically, they're trapped in what's called trauma homeostasis, a pattern where the nervous system craves the same emotional chaos it was raised in. Peace feels alien, so they unconsciously recreate conflict. Watts would have seen them as people trapped in illusion, people who mistake motion for progress, and noise for purpose. When you try to help them, you become their new source of chaos. They'll start fighting you just to feel alive. They'll turn your peace into their battleground. You must understand, you cannot build stability with someone who is addicted to destruction. No matter how spiritual, patient, or wise you are, they will burn every bridge and call the ashes freedom. The only way to help a chaos seeker is to stop dancing with their storm. Stand still. Let them spin alone, because eventually, when the noise runs out, they'll have to face the silence within themselves. In the next section, we'll uncover the final two types of people Alan Watts warns us never to help: the ones who wear masks of wisdom but carry hearts of emptiness. They are the philosopher of pain and the energy thief. These two are the most subtle and the most spiritually dangerous. Section 4. The philosopher of pain and the energy thief, masters of false light. Alan Watts once said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." But what happens when that aperture, that window of consciousness, becomes clouded by illusion, bitterness, and self-deception? That's where the next two dangerous archetypes live. They appear enlightened, wise, and but behind that wisdom lies a deep darkness, a sickness of the spirit that drains those around them. These are the philosopher of pain and the energy thief. 5. The philosopher of pain, the intellectual prisoner. The philosopher of pain is one of the most deceptive types of people you will ever meet. They speak like sages, quote philosophy, debate with insight, and often appear profoundly aware, but all their wisdom leads nowhere, because they use intelligence as a shield, not as a bridge. They study enlightenment to avoid transformation. They use words like ego, vibration, energy, illusion, but behind the language, they are still bound by fear, pride, and pain. Watts warned of this when he said, "To understand theory and not live it is like eating the menu instead of the meal." And that's what the philosopher of pain does. They feast on intellectual menus while starving for real experience. They hide behind complexity. They analyze emotion instead of feeling it. They dissect love instead of giving it. They use intellect to dominate, not to connect. When you try to help them, you'll find yourself trapped in endless conversations, circular reasoning, abstract debates, pseudo-spiritual arguments. They will challenge everything you say, not to understand, but to assert superiority. This person's mind is sharp, but their soul is stagnant. They use philosophy to justify suffering, and pain to validate their intelligence. If you tell them about peace, they'll say peace is naive. If you speak of love, they'll say love is illusion. If you speak of God, they'll say God is a social construct. Alan Watts called this the disease of overthinking. Consciousness, when the mind becomes its own prison, when awareness becomes analysis, and spirituality becomes a sport of ego. You cannot help a philosopher of pain, because they don't want healing, they want to win. They are addicted to intellectual dominance. They crave validation through depth. But real depth is not how much you know, it's how deeply you feel. So when you meet this person, do not debate them, do not argue, do not prove, do not persuade, because in trying to help them see, you become another concept in their labyrinth of words. Sometimes the wisest thing to do is walk away, and let life teach them what logic cannot. 6. The energy thief. The shadow of the awakened, the last and most dangerous type, is the one who looks most like you. They talk about awakening, vibration, manifestation, and alignment. They meditate, journal, quote Alan Watts, but not to grow, to perform. They are spiritual on the surface, but parasitic at the core. They use light to hide their shadow. The energy thief appears calm, centered, and kind, but the moment you open your soul to them, they begin feeding on your attention, admiration, and energy that complement you, but always just enough to keep you engaged. They listen, but always to gather emotionally. ammunition. They mirror your wisdom, but use it to gain control. You'll often find them in spiritual communities, the healers, the gurus, the teachers, who secretly craved followers. They offer advice not from love, but from ego, because their sense of power depends on how many people depend on them. Watts spoke of this danger when he said, "If you get the message, hang up the phone." Meaning, spirituality is not meant to become an identity. Once the truth awakens you, you let go of the teacher, the label, the performance. But the energy thief never hangs up the phone. They use enlightenment as a brand, a mask to hide their hunger for control. You can't help them, because their help is the trap. The moment you enter their orbit, you feel spiritually exhausted, yet guilty for leaving. You'll confuse your depletion for growth. That's the spell they cast. The illusion that pain is progress. So, what do? You detach with compassion. You don't expose them, you outgrow them. You walk away quietly, without judgment, without hate, because even they are part of the divine game of awakening. Watts would tell you, light cannot exist without shadow, and your job is not to destroy darkness, but to see it clearly and choose not to live within it. That is how you protect your energy. That is how you preserve your peace. In the next and final section, we'll reveal the ultimate truth Alan Watts wanted you to understand about helping others, the balance between compassion and wisdom, and how to give light without letting the darkness consume you. This is where philosophy becomes power, and awakening becomes armor. Section 5. The paradox of compassion. How to help without losing yourself. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." And that is the spiritual essence of this entire lesson. You cannot clear another person's confusion by diving into it. You can only remain still, and let your clarity become the mirror through which they see themselves. Because here's the truth that most people can't handle. You don't save others by carrying them. You save them by standing strong enough to remind them that they can walk. You are not here to fix broken people. You are here to show that wholeness exists. And that is the paradox of compassion. It must be both loving and ruthless. If it lacks love, it becomes cruelty. If it lacks ruthlessness, it becomes self-destruction. The balance between empathy and boundaries. We live in a culture that confuses empathy with responsibility. We're told to always help, always listen, always give. But Alan Watts warned against this illusion. He said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. Meaning, the moment you attach your worth to being a savior, you've lost yourself in someone else's reflection. Helping without boundaries isn't kindness, it's control disguised as virtue. It's the ego pretending to be divine, because deep down, you're saying, I can fix you, I can do what life itself cannot. But you can't. You are not the universe's janitor, you are the universe's expression. Real compassion isn't about interference, it's about alignment. It's not about saving, it's about seeing. It's not about doing more, it's about being more conscious in what you do. The awakened soul knows this. You can walk beside someone, but you cannot walk for them. You can hold space for their pain, but you cannot take their lesson. You can love them deeply, but you must never let that love make you forget your path. The spiritual power of detachment does not mean coldness, it means clarity. It means you can watch someone suffer and still trust their journey. It means you can offer help once and then let go of what they choose to do with it, because the universe does not waste pain. Every wound has its timing. Every heartbreak is a classroom. Every failure is a form of initiation. When you rush in to rescue someone from their own karma, you delay their evolution and burden your own. Watts taught that the very act of trying to fix others comes from the illusion that they are separate from you. But when you see that they are also the universe expressing itself, you stop trying to interfere and start trusting the intelligence behind their suffering. You start realizing the addict will change when pain outweighs pleasure. The liar will change when truth becomes unbearable to deny. The victim will change when silence becomes louder than sympathy. The manipulator will fall when their own web becomes too tangled to sustain. Your role is not to accelerate their process. Your role is to embody what peace looks like on the other side. How to help without hurting yourself. So how do you love the world without letting it consume you? The answer lies in 3 silent disciplines. 1. Observe without absorbing. You can feel empathy without internalizing the emotion. Let pain pass through you like wind through an open window. 2. Give without expecting. If your help requires recognition, it's not love, it's ego. Offer kindness, then walk away, knowing that the seed was planted even if you never see it. Bloom. 3. Detach without hate. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. You can bless people from afar. You can release them with peace instead of punishment. Alan Watts said, "The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. So let people flow. Let endings happen. Stop trying to freeze what was meant to evolve, because every person you couldn't save was never yours to rescue. Every friendship that faded was never your failure. Every relationship that collapsed was never your punishment. It was all preparation, the purification of your boundaries, the sharpening of your awareness, the strengthening of your spirit. And when you finally stop trying to save others, you begin to save yourself, not from love, but from illusion." The final lesson Alan Watts once told his students: "You are the universe experiencing itself, but you are under no obligation to fix it." That is the essence of freedom. To live with compassion, but not attachment. To care deeply, but not drown. To love everyone, but not lose yourself to anyone. So remember this: if your peace feels endangered by someone else's storm, you don't need to fight, argue, or convince. You simply need to walk away and stay in alignment with the truth that silence is the loudest teacher of all. Because one day, they'll look for you and realize your absence spoke the lesson your presence never could.